So there's a huge change shaking up how new federal employees get to keep their jobs. It's all thanks to something called Executive Order 142084. And believe me, it completely rewrites the rulebook for getting a permanent civil service position. So let's dig into what this really means. And that question right there is the whole ballgame. For, decades, the answer was pretty simple. If you made it through your probation without getting fired, that job was yours. But this executive order just completely flips that script. Now, keeping that job is anything but the default. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at what the rule actually is, then we'll get into the problem it's trying to fix. After that, we'll explore the massive shift in thinking it represents, see how the new process works, and then, boil it all down to the bottom line. All right, first up, let's get our heads around the rule itself. And just to be clear, this isn't some tiny little update. We're talking about a whole new framework for federal employment. So on April 24, 2025, this executive order drops and it creates a brand new rule. They're calling it Civil Service Rule 11. And its one and only job is to totally redefine that probationary period, the trial run for new hires. This isn't just a tweak, it's a complete overhaul of the whole system. So, of course, you're probably wondering why. Why make such a dramatic change? Well, the executive order is actually super clear about the problem it's trying to solve. Well, if you look at Section 1 of the order, it lays it all out. The problem was that federal agencies just weren't really using probationary periods as the tough filter they were supposed to be. The text even points to findings from the Government Accountability Office suggesting that, it was just too easy for underperformers to coast through and get permanent status. The whole goal here is to raise that bar and build a more efficient, higher-performing workforce. And get this idea isn't new, not by a long shot. The executive order actually pulls a quote from a 2005 report from the Merit Systems Protection Board. This report recommended almost 2 decades ago that employment should just automatically end when probation is over unless the agency actively steps in to keep the person. So yeah, this idea has been floating around for a very long time. And that recommendation from all those years ago, it perfectly captures what this new rule is all about. We're moving away from an opt-out system where you're basically in unless someone kicks you out, to a brand new opt-in system. Let's take a look at what that actually means. Okay, this slide right here. This is probably the most important one to really get. In the old way, doing nothing was a good thing for the employee. If the agency just let the clock run out, congrats, you are permanent. But under this new rule, doing nothing means you're out of a job. The agency has to take a deliberate, positive action to keep you. The default has been completely turned on its head. And the order uses this really specific, really powerful language. The agency must affirmatively determine that keeping you is a good thing. I mean, think about that for a second. It's not about just not being a problem anymore. Now it's about actively proving that you're an asset. The agency has to consciously decide and put it in writing that you bring value. All right, so that's the big idea, the philosophy behind it. But what does it actually look like day to day? Because a big idea doesn't mean much without a process. And this order lays out a very specific, mandatory process that every agency has to follow. So here's the new workflow. First, agencies have to pick specific people to do these evaluations. It can't just be anybody. Second, those officials have to meet with the employee with at least 2 months to go. Third, a final decision has to be made sometime in that last 30-day window. And finally, to keep somebody, the agency has to formally certify in writing that doing so serves the public interest. So what exactly are they looking for in that certification? Well, the new rule gives them a few key things to consider. It's not just, did you do your job well? It's also about the bigger picture. Does the agency even still need this position? Does this person actually help the organization reach its goals and work more efficiently? It's a much broader evaluation. Okay, so we've gone through the rule, the why, and the how. Let's boil this all down. If you're going to remember one single thing from all this, what should it be? To really get it, we've got to touch on a legal idea called the burden of proof. It's a simple concept, really. It just means who has to do the proving. And that, right there, is the single biggest change. The burden of proof has done a complete 180. Before, the agency had to build a case to get rid of you. Now, the new rules has it right in the text. The employee bears the burden of demonstrating why they should stay. It's a massive, fundamental flip in responsibility. So, I'll leave you with this to chew on. When you move from a system where you stay unless someone proves you're unfit, to a system where you have to prove you're worthy, How do you think that kind of affirmative certification might change the day-to-day culture, the motivation, and just the overall performance of the federal workforce? Something to think about.